Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology. Morning, guys. I've got Alexi here, and I've got Theo.
Morning, Andy.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning, Alexi. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. This is the first one of the year. And actually, there's been a lot of activity over the last, since our last Topical Talkology. Obviously, there's the COVID-19 still goes on and on and on, and is boring us all to hell. You've got this whole thing that's happened. We've had Brexit, and we've also had, we're also going through some high level of entertainment of what's going on in the States at the moment. And then obviously we've got the whole social media conspiracy theories out there floating around. So there's plenty to talk about today. So let's get started. And we're really going to be looking at what is actually, how do you control a mass population, really? And this is ultimately what is appearing between the lines. Okay, guys. Theo, do you want to get us started on that?
Yes, you control the mass population with purpose and fear. Simple as that. And you can use anything. One of the greatest uses, of course, is religion, because religion is global, and it can be used, therefore, to lead people. And it depends on how you use it. It can be done because leading can be bad or it can be good. But the power. Go on.
Yeah, but let me throw this one in there. And the thing is, particularly when you look at the countries like the UK, the US, to even a degree to Australia, which ultimately are all the colonized countries, well, apart from the UK, who did the colonizing. But you're looking at all the colonized countries, which is where everybody is ultimately looking to reach. But that's a much larger topic before we actually get taken out of context. But the thing is, as all these countries are becoming far more multicultural, how do you control a population with so many different cultures and different sets of values? Because the thing is, you can't actually pin it down to just, for example, Christianity or Islam anymore. Because the thing is,
beautifully put.
It's so
beautifully put, Andy.
It is so diverse now.
Corona is how you do it. Corona is how you do it. You've got a global imaginary predator, and you're using science. Okay, you're politicizing science. And it doesn't even have to be correct, you see. And then you can use it for whatever means you want, because humans are hardwired to respond to authority. And the best way of getting anyone to move is fear and purpose together. So you're right. Now that religion specifically is becoming trickier, because you're right, it's been dissolved by capitalism and multiculturalism and political correctness. Then you have to find something which is more woke. And what is woke? Woke is effectively the champion of the mediocrity. And of course, it's really, really easy to have an invisible predator. And then everyone can comply and wear masks and jump to the other side of the pavement when someone walks by. And then, of course, you can invent all sorts of nonsense to make people do things. I'll give you an example. See, praying, I mean, it's not nonsense, is it? But it's a habit and a ritual which gives people reassurance. It's structure, and therefore clear structure. Oh, you've got to wear masks. Oh, you've got to not go out and not do this. As long as it's clear, it's comforting. People will respond to that, which is why the people have an unbelievable tolerance of subjugation. And in fact, the Niall Ferguson is on record for saying they didn't think they could get away with it until they saw what China did. And they saw that people have an enormous tolerance for subjation.
Yeah, but China is also very different because well, they don't have a choice but to respond to authority in places like China, because it's a communist country, so it doesn't have a democratic process like over here. But it's also the.
Have you seen much democracy here, though? Have you seen much democracy here? And with £10,000 fines and nonsense like that.
We've all challenged the what we call the illusion of that is created to actually to instigate democracy, in effect. But it's also like that. The elephant theory, where they used to do in the circuses, where you actually tie an elephant with a piece of with a chain to a peg. And the thing is, eventually, the elephant being so big will attempt to pull away, but eventually it actually resists. And then all you have to do is then tie a piece of string around it. If you've ever seen those things, and then because it's already conditioned and it just conforms and accepts the situation, it's. So I think that so the degree that's what they're doing to to a lot of the people as well. So it's far bigger than this. And even when we're out of this COVID, there's going to be so many more restrictions still kept in place.
You used a great word, conditioned, and of course a much more emotive word is grooming.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of my patients who's a barrister and has had unfortunately quite abusive relationships, he immediately recognized what's going on currently as grooming. In other words, you test someone's boundaries, get them used to it, and then you just keep on extending them. And so we see this all the time, whether it's and the government do it all the time. In other words, no, we don't want to do this. And of course, as soon as someone says that, it's going to happen. They're just getting us used to it. And as I said in the last podcast, this is the thin end of the wedge. They will find more and more flimsy excuses to continuously subjugate the population. And basically the reason is that I think some powers have worked out that people, well, this is one option, and there are several options, but some powers have worked out that the population needs to be subjugated in order to continue functioning.
So, but what it was, the thing is, this whole COVID thing's done on a global scale, and maybe each country has taken their own initiative to instill things that they wouldn't have been unnecessarily able to do before. But what is the purpose of doing all this now? Or is it just because they've taken advantage of the situation?
Well, that's the thing, you see.
They're right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think they're taking advantage of the situation. I remember when I moved from the Czech Republic to work here in the UK, and the first time I saw the news in 4.5 years, the first comment I made, and this is my naivety because of what you've just said, Theo, and it just makes sense. The first question I said first observation I made was, where's the context? For example, I won't go over the whole thing again, but, we're just given one figure with no comparison to flu or anything else. And there's no context with how many people are admitted to hospital. There's no proper reporting on any scale. It's completely disappeared. And now we've just done the full round of 10 months. It makes perfect sense to me. They purposely did not put any context in so that the message could be as clear as possible, to scare as much as possible, to put the fear of God into as many people as possible, to have the maximum control. Because if you do add context and proper figures and proper reporting, people will make an informed decision. And my God, we don't want that, do we?
It's interestingly, you see, informed decisions are dangerous. And you know what I've always said about free speech? I actually don't think free speech, as it is currently applied and defined, is a good thing. I think it's very important in certain situations for the good of the community. But if we go back to the context and the why, it's really interesting. When I was in Athens recently, a cousin of mine is one of the top reporters on national TV, and he does the morning news. And he just hasn't looked at the truth. He's just reporting on statistics as they are. And he was really surprised when I showed him graphs that actually Greece is not doing at all badly. And in fact, current mortality in Greece is exactly the same as it was last year, excess mortality. It's bizarre. And so the question is, first of all, why is it happening? And right at the beginning, I poo-pooed conspiracy theories. And it could still be an enormous, horrible mistake, because what we have now, which we didn't have 20 or 30 years ago, is social media. And what happens is, because things go viral, and what they found is that fake news transmits 6 times faster and deeper than real news because of the shock factor. So anything that stimulates emotion is going to be forwarded and retweeted. The truth tends not to stimulate emotion.
Sorry, Theo, is it still giving that dopamine hit as well, just out of curiosity?
Of course, because it's a stimulation. It's a stimulus to the senses.
Yeah, but the thing is, there's also a thing called negativity bias, which, I mean, you can, depending on how much fear you instill in something, it can be as much, it can be, 10 to 1. So for every positive, there are 10 negatives that counterbalance it. But the more fear you instill, it can be as much as 30 negative things to counteract the one positive. No, sorry, you need 30 positive things to counteract the one negative.
Exactly. You see, spot on, Andy. And so what you then have is a government who has to respond to the nation, otherwise they won't stay in power. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of democracy, isn't it?
But it's interesting because you talk about free speech, but if you actually look at what's happening with social media, which is probably a good into this area, is the way they're actually censoring everything, and they've got no liability because the laws give them or the American laws give them so much leeway because they were a social media platform, which meant they'd have to put everything up. But now that they're censoring stuff, because I know they've banned Trump. And I think one good thing about this podcast is in the next few weeks we probably won't have to hear we won't have to be mentioning Trump anymore because he'll be gone. But
don't assume that too quickly.
No, I'm not. I'll keep that one quite vague actually. But I think from a political point of view, I don't think there'll be much. I think he'll go down in history now. Now he's been impeached a second time. Which is probably the biggest mistake they've actually ever made. But one, it's to actually prevent him from ever becoming president again, which if you read between the lines says that he's actually, they're worried that he would get back in because they can't pull the same thing that he did this time round. But secondly, he'll probably go down as one of the most famous men in history behind George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, having been the first person to be impeached a second time. So in some ways it's played in his favor. Because if he actually ever wanted to create a legacy of his ego, he's ultimately achieved that, even if it's in a negative way.
Well, that's right. And equally, if you believe in all the conspiracy theories, and in fact, there's a very good documentary on Amazon Prime. The fact is, this has all been a horrible. He's been the victim of the establishment trying to oust him and get rid of him for a variety of reasons.
Well, they've done that for 4 years, but I just want to go back because the thing is, look, the people are benefiting from this. A big pharma who will just keep on, you think the COVID vaccination is actually a good money earner, but ultimately it's also going to be Prozac because the amount of people who are probably going through their mental health issues being in lockdown, which is what they've not naturally grown up with.
Well, actually, if I just gently stop you there and be slightly pedantic, Prozac is off patent now, so they're not going to make money off that, but they will make money off vaccines. So, for instance, the Bill Gates is on record several years ago for saying that he makes 20 to 1 profit from his investments in vaccines already. Hold that thought. And he's the one pushing all this stuff, and he's the one who is the largest funder of the WHO. And the WHO have actually changed their definition of herd immunity. So before, so in 2019, their definition was when enough people have been infected and or have had the vaccine. Now the definition is when enough people have had the vaccine. Tedros who's the head of the WHO, is in the pockets of the Chinese, and he himself is wanted in his country for genocide. So that's a thought, and that's just a fact to make people think.
If you go back to social media, sorry Theo, if you go back to social media, I find it quite funny. I mean, social media can always be ridiculous and be made, it makes a fool of itself sometimes. And when you have I've forgotten his name, McCulkin, who's actually trying to get himself back into films and get himself a job again, is using the Home Alone 2 as an excuse to erase Trump from